Hey everybody, this is Russ from Retro Game Core. Today we're going to talk about playing your Steam PC games, including using your Steam cloud saves on Android-based devices. I've talked about this concept a lot in my other previous videos. The idea of using an app like Winlator to translate over a Windows PC experience into an Android machine, which is running a completely different architecture. The experience that I want on Android is to be able to navigate through your library, pick your Steam game, load up your Steam cloud save, and then just go right into there, and everything's going to work between your handheld PCs, your home computer, as well as your Android-based device, and we are finally there. So today we're going to focus on two apps that do exactly that. One is called GameNative, another called GameHub, and I think you will find these results pretty striking. It's getting to the point where I can see myself using the Steam Deck less because these smaller Android handhelds can play some of my favorite indie titles. So in this video, we're going to talk about all the ways that I have been playing my PC games on Android devices and the way I see them going forward thanks to these new updates. So grab your favorite snack and drink. Let's go ahead and dive in. Now, as we jump into this video, I'm going to use a lot of different Android devices, but many of them will be pretty familiar if you've been watching some recent videos, just because these are the most recently updated. Let's start by talking about how I envision PC gaming on Android, and I think everybody's got their different approaches to it, but the way that I want to play is to not play like AAA titles. I think that's just not really there just yet, but rather to play my favorite indie titles, but with cross saves between the platforms. Ideally, I would be able to play my game on my computer at home, then jump on my Steam Deck and get that cloud save and play that same save game, and then also do the same thing on an Android-based device, and vice versa, and kind of go between all of them while having that same save game the entire time. The idea is to chip away at these games, with various different platforms in different environments. If I'm laying in bed, sitting on a couch, and so on. And so that's always been the ideal for me. A lot of my favorite indie games are available on the Nintendo Switch, so often what I will do is I'll dump that ROM, then put it in an emulator, and then play that on Android. So I can play something like Celeste or Hades. Those are the majority of the games that I generally will play. But the issue with this setup is that the cross-save functionality isn't really there. It's actually pretty easy within Switch. You can go into these emulators and export your save file and then import it into a different device. And so if I'm moving from device to device, that's not too hard. I can just upload it into Google Drive, then pull it from there. But the thing is that you can't really get cross-platform between Switch and PC. So for example, with Hades, I've played this for, about 100 hours on PC over the years, but on Switch, I've got a different save game running. So you can see here, I've got 15 escape attempts in Hades here, but I've got about 100 or so on PC. And so it's like two different storylines that I'm running right now. And that can work out okay with certain games. Like I don't really mind having two different save games with Hades. It's more about the gameplay itself. But for other games, like a role-playing game, I'd hate to have two different games going at once. And so often I have to choose between one or the other. And sometimes having a Nintendo Switch layout has bitten me in the butt. Probably one of my most famous examples is the game Sea of Stars. I put a lot of time into this game. I've got a save game right here that's got 24 hours into it. I'm about maybe 80% into the game, but unfortunately, once I got to this part in the game, the app crashed. And I tried all sorts of different emulator options, Ryujinx and Yuzu desktop, and as well as, here on Android, and none of them can get past that part. And so I've just been stuck on this for about a year at this point where I can't get any further in this game. And unfortunately, my Steam cloud save is nowhere near that far. So I'm going to have to backtrack and play all the way up to that 24-hour mark again if I want to continue that storyline. And so there is some merit to playing your indie PC games on Android via Switch emulation, but there are some big limitations. Number one being that emulation compatibility and whether or not you're going to get stuck in the game because of the coding errors or whatever. But then also, the cross-save compatibility with Steam. And if you're trying to just have one save game on all your platforms, it really doesn't work. Another option I've used to play PC games is to stream them locally. So this is an app called Artemis. It's a fork of Moonlight, and this essentially allows me to access all of my library from a different PC. So this is connected to a local PC here, and so I can jump into a game like Balatro and have access to my Steam cloud saves and everything else. The limitation here is you'll need a computer that you can connect to and also a network connection to be able to play these games. And there will obviously be some delay when playing these as well because you are playing playing them over the air. But depending on the game and the device that you're using, this might be an excellent experience too. This is the Odin 2 Portal. It's got a 7-inch 1080p display and it's OLED. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. You can get some pretty low decoding time with Artemis here. And so it almost feels like you're playing natively on the device. Another option would be streaming over the cloud. So for example, with NVIDIA GeForce Now, this one doesn't require you to have a computer to stream to. Instead, NVIDIA hosts that computer. And once you sync it with like your Xbox or your Steam libraries, you will then be able to play all these games over the internet. There are some limitations to this as well, including the fact that cloud streaming over the internet is usually going to be a little bit worse than local game streaming with your own PC at home. And then also NVIDIA GeForce Now has paid tiers if you really want to unlock all the features like a high refresh rate. And so you will end up paying to have this service. The other thing I've found about GeForce Now is that when you have access to a lot of processing power, those NVIDIA GPUs, at the paid tier, you have access to like a 5080. And so what I find is that I end up playing higher res games, like more AAA titles than my indie titles, just because, hey, if I can play like the latest and greatest, I might as well just try that out too. And so I find myself kind of neglecting my indie games in favor of AAA titles just because I have all that raw performance power. So I don't think this is a perfect fit when it comes to indie games either, at least from all those various perspectives. One other potential option to play your indie PC titles on Android is to play them via ports. So officially, there are several that are on the Google Play Store, like Blasphemous here. It's $8. Now, if you already own it on Steam, that means you'd have to buy it again, and there's no cross-save compatibility here either, but that is one option. For example, on iOS, for some time, they had Hades available via Netflix, but they took that down, and so now you no longer have a way to play Hades on your iPhone. We've also got some unofficial PC ports available on Android, stuff like Hollow Knight and Half-Life 2, but it's very unofficial. You'll have to scour around the internet, either through YouTube videos or Discord servers, to find the packages for that. That'll be an APK, and then you have to drag in your own game files. And so it's kind of like Portmaster, but only for Android and for very few games. And again, not very official either. And that's not what I'm going for here. I want something that's just seamless. I can go through, look at my Steam library, play my games with my Steam cloud saves, and we finally have apps that let us do that. And so now that we've talked about all the different ways that you can play PC indie games on your Android-based device, let's now talk about stuff like Winlator and GameNative and GameHub. So as far as I've been following it, Winlator is kind of like the original here, and it's probably the most complex, but can be the most rewarding if you have it all set up. And from the name Winlator, you might think that it's Windows emulation, but it's not quite like that. It's a little bit more complex. I think that this Reddit post, which I'll leave linked down below, summarizes it the best. And that is that when you're playing something like Winlator, what it's doing is running a Windows environment inside of Linux, which is then ported over to Android. To translate Windows into Linux, they're using a tool called Wine, which literally breaks out to Wine is not an emulator. This one's essentially a compatibility layer that allows it to run via Linux. Once you're in that environment, it uses a couple extra tools called Box86 and Box64 to translate the binaries of the apps themselves into something that will work on ARM devices. So not only is it translating the Windows environment into a Linux environment, which can then be run on Android, but then it is also running the x86 apps on ARM devices, which are two different architectures. So there are multiple things happening at once, and that's essentially what Winlator does. Now, once you have Winlator running, it's kind of like a sandbox environment where you will have to install your games within here and then launch them within this environment. There's a lot of configuration that has to be done, and with every update, it gets a little bit easier, but the configurations may change. And so it becomes a cat and mouse game where you may be going on Reddit and looking for, different device-like recommendations in terms of compatibility layers and configuration files. And there are also various versions of Winlator out there as well. And so it is a pretty complicated environment to jump into. So we're not going to talk about Winlator in this video just because it is very splintered and it is a moving target. Instead, I want to talk about GameNative and GameHub, which allow you to browse your Steam library directly and then launch them directly from that app, and you will have your Steam cloud saves. So let's start with GameNative, which is a fork of an app called Pluvia, which I had featured in a video before, but this one's been updated quite quite a bit and also has Steam Cloud Save. So you can find this one on their GitHub page. It's just going to be an APK that you can download and then install on your device. So I've already got it running on this tablet, and essentially all you do is start up the app and then it'll make you log into your Steam account, and from there you can just browse your Steam library, pick a game, and then install it. Once you have it installed, you can see I have a bunch here. You can just open it directly from this menu. Once you've got some games installed, you can then choose them and then just play them directly with the inherent settings that they have in the app already, or you can go into Edit Container, and within here you can adjust things like the resolution of the game, or you can change the different turnip drivers, a couple different wrappers here. What I generally will do is I'll just play it outright with the default settings, and then if it doesn't work, I'll go around and kind of fiddle with these and see if I can make anything better. There's also an excellent website called EmuReady, which is kind of in lockstep with GameNative. And so what you can do is search for your game here, and then potentially there may be somebody who's already tried out that game on the same device that you're using, and they will have their configuration recommendations. So I would check out the EmuReady website if you are struggling with GameNative in particular. Their database also covers Switch emulation for Eden in particular, so if you're using that app, this is a really great resource. And that's really GameNative in a nutshell. I found that performance on this isn't quite as good as GameHub, which we'll be talking about next, but it's still really impressive, and it keeps getting better and better. We've seen new updates every few weeks, and with each update, this is becoming a better platform. In just the past couple weeks, some games that weren't working previously, like Parking Garage Rally Circuit and Balatro, they now work absolutely fine with my cloud saves. As it stands right now, only about maybe 25% of the games that I've been trying have actually worked with GameNative, but who knows what it's going to be like 6 months from now. It keeps getting better every few weeks. So it might be worth experimenting with if you've got an Android-based device, but just bear in mind that there are quite a few bugs or games that don't work. The app also does a pretty good job of collecting your feedback, so you're able to rate it the first time that you run the game, and you can also add whatever issues you have. For example, if the controller doesn't work or maybe the game doesn't open, and you can even describe it and then submit it. They've also got a Discord page, which you can find either directly here from one of these feedback pages, or you can also find it on any of these game pages by going in here and then going to Get Support. So you've got multiple avenues here with GameNative that are set up to kind of help you along the way. I really like that. So I think that GameNative is a platform worth considering, even if it does have a little bit less performance than the next one we're going to talk about, called GameHub. Now, GameHub is an app that tries to do many things. It's not just focused on PC gaming. They have Android apps and stuff like that in it as well. It's made in partnership with GameServe, which is a controller company that I often will feature in this channel. And this is a Chinese-based app. Now, there are concerns about GameHub and its use of your private information. After all, you have to make a login for GameHub on its own, but then you also need to log into your Steam account via their app. And they're using, various APIs for that. And I'm not qualified to see whether or not any of these things are actually, being sold off to the Chinese government or whatever people are speculating. But there are a couple things you can see just by digging around. To start within the app, if you go into the About section, there is a personal information disclaimer right here. Now, a lot of this stuff is legalese, but there is one part right here that talks about the protection of user information. And again, I'm not qualified to speak to any of this stuff, but it does at least read to me that they are going to keep your personal information unless they are required by law to use it. Now, within that same section, there's a privacy protection policy too, and you can read about what information they collect and why. And at least according to what I've understood from this, they are mostly using it to be able to identify, where you are in the world so they can sell you one of your GameServe products. And then they also want to see whether or not, location-wise, you have a GameServe product nearby so it can pair between the two. Now, I would recommend reading through this if you are concerned about it. And of course, with any of this kind of legal writing, it is kind of hard to see exactly what's going on. Now, beyond just taking GameHub's word for it, you can also use an app called NetGuard and other apps like it that will allow you to basically see exactly what an app is connecting to. And so you can see here that, just looking at all the previous data that I found, it's mostly just connecting to Steam servers. I'm assuming just to, verify that you own the game and then also to check in with your cloud save. But there are some other addresses that it is connecting to. Again, I am not a network specialist, so I can't really speak to this with any authority, but if you are concerned about it, this is somewhere that you could go to do a little bit more digging. So if you are concerned about privacy, then it's probably worth investigating GameHub a little bit more. But in my own research, first going into Reddit and getting very alarmed by the series of hot takes that are on there, but then also looking at the app and looking through NetGuard, I don't know, I feel pretty good about this. And there are some workarounds when you actually get logging in. So for example, you just need to have an email address and password to log in, and you could use like a spoofed or dummy email address if you wanted. And then also when it comes to actually logging into Steam, you can use two-factor authentication, scan a QR code. So that's an additional layer of protection. And so using those methods, I'm pretty comfortable in using it, but I did want to at least show these concerns instead of just encouraging everybody to use this app that is based from overseas companies. So with all that out of the way, let's now talk about GameHub and get it installed and talk about my experience so far over the past week or so of testing. So number one, you can just go to the GameHub website. I just literally Googled it and then pulled it up here, and you can download its latest release. And they've been dropping new updates every 2 or 3 days, so it's been very fast. Once you've installed it, you can open it up and it's going to ask you to log in. So here, again, you can use your email address and password. You can connect it to your Google account or also your Apple ID. From there, it's going to take you to their main page, and this can be pretty confusing. It'll show a bunch of games, but it won't necessarily show how you're going to actually play them. And like I said, there are many different ways that you can do this, but we're going to focus on Steam. So to do this, we're going to go into the My section, and within here, there's a bunch of different services, and of course, there's Steam right here. So we're going to tap on that. This is going to ask us to sign into our Steam account. And again, from here, if you've got two-factor authentication, you can just scan your QR code and that will log you into your Steam account, and that's it. Once you're logged in, within that My tab and then tapping on Steam, it'll show your account and then it'll have all of your games listed down below. There doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason to these games, like they're not in alphabetical order or anything, so it might take some time to find the games that you want to actually install. But let's say you find a game like Castle Crashers, you can tap on it and it'll show you right here under PC Emulator, it'll say whether or not it has support. And most of the time it'll say not supported, but other times it'll say perfect support. Now, I found that even if it says perfect support, sometimes the game will not work, but that's at least one indicator that it has been tested. The beauty of GameHub is that the team has been making PC configuration files specific for each game. So when you try to start up a game, if somebody's already added all that on the software backend, they already know which configuration will likely work the best for you and on Android. And so this is one of the reasons why GameHub seems to be working so smoothly, is because a lot of it is pre-configured for you. So once you find a game and you want to install it, you can just tap on Get Game. It's going to also show you how big the file size is. In this case, it's 232 megs, and then how much space we have available on our device, which is over 100 gigs. So we got plenty of room here. It'll also warn you to make sure that you keep on this page while it downloads, just to make it a little bit faster, but it's so fast that it already downloaded. Now at this point, you can either go into the settings. So if you go into PC game settings, and you've got a bunch of different options here, the main thing I would recommend doing is going into the Steam section and making sure that it's set for auto sync cloud saves. And this should already be enabled by now. One other thing you can do, depending on how powerful your device is, if you go into general, you can change out your game resolution. So right now it's running at 720p, that's the default, but I've got a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 in my Odin 2 Portal. I'm going to pump it up all the way to 1080p. From there, we can hit play now, and the first thing it's going to ask is to enable location services. Again, I think this is in order to discover nearby devices, like any controller that's nearby, which isn't really an issue with an Android device that already has controls on it, but this is one thing where I just allow it while using the app. From there, the first time it downloads, it's going to download, like a compatibility layer if it needs it, and so on. Often it'll show you a trailer of the game as it's happening. Again, it's probably pulled from Steam. And this will only really happen the first time you start up the game. After that, it'll be a much faster process. After that, you will get this window right here, which will launch the client, it'll initialize it, it'll try to find your cloud saves and then sync them up, and then it'll launch the application. If it doesn't work, it'll say application failed. In this case, it said application launched, so I think we're going to be good to go. And so there we go, we now have Castle Crashers running on this device with my cloud saves. They also have down here a performance metric, so you can kind of watch your frames per second, and then sometimes, depending on the game, it'll also have it up here at the top. And so jumping into the game, you can see that I already have my cloud save from, I don't know, like 10 years ago. It's still there. And so that's one of the great things here, is that we can resume our game from PC, but natively on an Android device. Once you're done playing, you can either go back to the main menu and quit out of the app like you normally would, but you can also just go into the GameHub menu by pressing the back button or swiping back. And this will allow you to do other things like turning on touch controls, or you can enable a frame limit or turn on HDR if your game and device supports it. And you can also just force close the app right here with this exit button. Personally, I prefer to close out of the main menu, but sometimes I do have to force close the app. It really depends on the device and the game itself, but sometimes it'll just jump right back in. And so there we go, we're back in the GameHub menu, and it also syncs your cloud saves when you exit. So you can just jump into a different device and it'll save where you were. So let's use an example here with Hades. This is a game running on my iNeo Pocket DS, which is an Android-based system, but of course I'm running GameHub. Now, up until about a week ago, I couldn't get this game to work. It would boot into the game, but I couldn't get the controls to actually register. But lo and behold, with the latest update, it's working just fine. And this is also running off my Steam cloud save, as opposed to like the Nintendo Switch version that I was playing earlier. This is the one where I've done over 100 escape attempts. And so this is my main version of Hades, and it's awesome to be able to play this on an Android device. Now from here, all I have to do is just exit out of the game, close it out, and that will save my Steam game and push it up into the cloud. And then from there, the next time that I start up this game within Steam, either on my Steam Deck or through a different device running GameHub, it's going to pull over that save game. And so for me, this is an ideal situation. If I'm going to play this game on my Steam Deck or other handheld PC, but I also want to swap over to my main PC or maybe jump over to an Android-based device, I can do all of that while still playing my same save game for Hades. When you're in a game, there might be a couple things that you have to do. For example, sometimes the game won't be playing in full screen, so you'll have to go into the options menu within the game and turn that on, but that's a very easy fix if you ask me. For the most part, I was surprised at how many lightweight games are running well on Steam via GameHub. If I had to put a number on it, I would say the GameNative, the app that we were looking at before, gives me about a 20% success rate. Meanwhile, with GameHub, it's closer to 75%. It's really impressive. Now, bear in mind that I'm mostly playing lightweight games, and there's a couple reasons for it. Number one is the file download size is much smaller, which means that I can jump in and out of these games a lot more quickly. It's not going to fill up my internal storage. There's nothing worse than downloading a 40 or 50 gigabyte game and then finding out it just doesn't work anyway, and you've wasted all that bandwidth. So for the most part, yeah, I've been focusing on these lightweight games, which again is kind of the main focus I would want to play on Android anyway. And I was surprised that some games that I would consider to be a little bit heavier than lightweight, like Octopath Traveler 2, is working just fine. And this is really exciting for me because, like I mentioned earlier, playing a role-playing game across Nintendo Switch and then also PC can get really confusing because you only want to have really one save game when it comes to an RPG. And so in that case, I love the fact that I now have access to this cloud save via an Android platform. Now, other than just scrolling through and picking your games within Steam, if you've got a large library, that might take a long time. So what you can do is actually just search for the game by its name. So, for example, let's talk about Hollow Knight Silksong. So far, both of these games have worked out great on this device. So let's try Silksong here and kind of talk about the process I have for getting this set up. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, Bob Wolf did a video talking about PC gaming on Android, which really got me thinking about it. In fact, he got me with that one. I even left a comment saying, man, now I want to play Silksong on a handheld device. And the way it all unfolded is pretty funny because, initially he said, well, share your configurations because you couldn't get Steam Cloud Saves working. And I was like, okay, I'll try to figure that out. But by the time I actually got to it, both GameHub and GameNative got Steam Cloud Saves working great, and they also fixed compatibility with the game too, so they actually got it running. From there, Bob pinned a comment in his video saying, hey, these are all the configurations you need to do to get this working. And then after that, GameHub just fixed it, and so you don't even have to do the stuff that Bob says in his video. The game is just going to work. And that's one of the great things about GameHub is that they are making these per game configurations for you on the back end, so it makes it a lot easier as a user. But there are some things about Silksong that do need a little bit of configuration as of making this video, but it only really has to do with the cloud saves. If you go into the PC game settings and then go into Steam, what you will find is that under the Steam client version, by default, it's going to have what they call lightweight mode. Apparently, this gives you the best performance, but it can also cause problems with Steam Cloud Saves. So if we start up a game, it is getting 120 frames per second with that lightweight client, but I also don't have my cloud saves, and that's the number one reason why I want to play this on my device is to be able to sync it between my PC games. So what we're going to do here is we're going to exit out of the game and then try the other Steam version. So this time, instead of using the lightweight mode, I'm going to use the one that's fully featured that has the number behind it. So this is a different Steam client. client. And this time when I launch it, you can see that I now have my cloud saves. So that's one of the recommendations I would do. If you're not seeing your cloud saves, is change out your Steam client and see if that fixes things. And so there we go. I'm now playing Hollow Knight Silksong with cloud saves on my Odin 2 portal via GameHub. And I think this is pretty awesome. Now, I'm not getting a full 120 frames per second. Instead, it's hovering around like 110 or so, but you know, I'll take it. I think that's still pretty darn good to be able to play this on Android. And also bear in mind, I'm actually not using the full performance mode on this device. I'm just using like the middle performance mode right here. So you know, there might actually be a little bit better gameplay if you want to push it further, but for me personally, I think this is a good balance right now. Another thing to pay attention to is how much RAM is being used by the app as you're playing. And this device right now has 12 gigabytes of RAM. You can see it's taking up about 58% altogether. So I think that if you had 8 gigabytes of RAM, you might find some limitations when playing these Windows games. Something like 12 gigabytes and even up to 16 will probably give you some better performance in the long run. And so this is probably one of my favorite factors of these apps like GameNative and GameHub is that I can play this brand new indie PC game that came out just a couple weeks ago with cloud saves on my Android-based devices. I can do that on a tablet. I can do it on my Retroid Pocket 2S. In fact, this game even runs on the Retroid Pocket 5. Now, it's only running about 45 frames per second, so there is a compromise here when it comes to overall performance, but this is an older chipset. It's the Snapdragon 865. I also did have to look up on Reddit and mess around with some of these settings to get it to work properly. So I'm going to show you my settings right here, and you can pause it and kind of change it if you'd like, if you have a Retroid Pocket Flip or a Retroid Pocket 5. I think the Retroid Pocket 5 and Flip 2 are actually really excellent devices for this entire setup. You're not going to be able to play everything, but you might be surprised what plays and what doesn't. I love the idea of playing Balatro on an OLED display in a smaller device like this, and again having access to my Steam cloud saves. I was also surprised to find that Hades is a pretty stable like 58, 59 frames per second, so it's a nearly perfect experience. It's at least good enough for me that I definitely plan on playing my overall Steam save game of Hades on the Retroid Pocket 5 and Flip 2. Okay, before we wrap up, there are two things you might have questions about. The first is battery life, like how quickly is this going to drain your device's battery? And I found it to be above average. It's pretty heavyweight. So as an example, I played Hades on the Retroid Pocket 5 for 1 hour and it drained the battery 33%. So you can extrapolate from that you'll get about 3 hours of battery life playing GameHub with Hades, which is a pretty demanding game. So from there, you can probably think that, you know, an easier game will probably give you more battery life, but if you're really pushing it, it might get a little bit worse, but that's what I would expect. It's all really going to depend on the device and its chipset and the size of the battery, but, you know, it's probably going to be along the lines of like a worst case scenario and how quickly the battery drains. The last question might be whether or not you can play this offline. By default, it's all going to be online. It's going to check that you still have your like Steam identity and everything when you first log into GameHub, and it also is going to require you to connect to Steam when you start up a game. But there are workarounds for that. So you can go into the settings here, PC game settings, and in the Steam tab, there's an option for offline mode. So let's go ahead and turn that on. So now the game is going to run in offline mode. On top of that, you don't actually need to be connected to start up a game. So let's turn on airplane mode. So now this is not connected to the internet and it also is running in offline mode. So now let's try Silksong. It's going to do the same thing where it's going to like check your resources and whatnot, but even if it doesn't find anything because you are offline, it is still going to launch the application. And so there we go. We are now playing this game in offline mode and we also have access to our save game, but this is a local save game. That means that in order to get this save game in the first place, you will have to start up the game while it's online to download that from the cloud. After that, you can go into offline mode. You'll have access to that local save game. Once you're done with all that, you're ready to go back online, then I would recommend launching the game again, but in online mode. So that way it'll upload this save game and it'll be the most recent save game. That way, the next time that you launch this on a different platform, for example, a Steam Deck or a handheld PC, you'll be able to access that game as well. So there's a little bit of work that's involved in order to play this offline, but honestly, that's the same thing you have to do with a Steam Deck anyway. So there we go. There's a quick wrap up of the state of PC gaming on Android right now, and I think it's really exciting. The ability to have your Steam cloud saves and be able to basically just navigate through a Steam client on GameHub and GameNative is pretty awesome, and that's exactly what I'm hoping for. And I think it's going to get better in the future. I think we'll have better compatibility the more people use this and provide feedback. And at some point, I'm hoping that Steam and Valve gets involved themselves and they launch their own compatibility layer. And we have something like that, then we may not have to rely on these third parties anymore. We can just use Steam natively on Android, and that's going to be awesome. So in the end, I think there are two major takeaways for me. Number one is that I don't really see this as being a PC replacement, but more of a complement. Like I mentioned earlier, I do see myself playing my Steam Deck and streaming my handheld games a little bit less frequently now that I can play them on an Android-based device, just because I can play it natively and it's just so convenient. But at the same time, I still plan on playing my AAA PC titles directly on like a bigger PC. And then also, I love playing games on the Steam Deck too, beyond just lightweight titles. My other takeaway is that this makes me more excited for the Snapdragon 8 Elite chipset devices that are coming out in the future, like the Odin 3. Now, the Elite is not a great compatibility chip when it comes to emulation, but when it comes to PC gaming, it actually really excels. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to play even more PC games on those devices compared to what we have now. As it stands, it's very exciting to play my favorite lightweight PC games on my Android devices. It just makes these Android-based devices more and more of a value. So let me know what you think in the comments down below if you tried any of this handheld PC stuff and what do you think about it. As always, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you found this helpful. We will see you next time. Happy gaming.